It's my pleasure today to introduce for you guys Dr. Carson Meredith. He is the Executive Director of the Georgia Tech Renewable Bioproducts Institute and James Harris Faculty Fellow there at Tech. Dr. Meredith's group researches the surfaces and interfaces of advanced materials. Their work aims to apply fundamentals of polymer surface and colloid science to find new ways to engineer materials useful to society and industry. And meaningful for our group is that their research faculty are studying new ways and innovative ways to use cellulose, nanocellulose, and other properties that come from trees to replace often carbon intensive materials like plastics and others. And you saw in the description of this event that one of the kind of coolest things in our opinion that they're working on is replacing actually the material that's used in chip bags to be made out of wood, which is a big deal for our industry from a lot of perspectives, and it's a big deal for Georgia being the #1 forestry state in the nation. Just a quick note about Dr. Meredith. We were chatting before the call here, and he let me know that he's a avid woodworker. And he owns two dogs and likes to spend time outdoors. So sounds a lot like some of our members. And so we're happy to have you here as part of our family and dialing in to talk a little bit about your work and what you do.
Well, thanks a lot, Matt. I appreciate it. I'm really happy to be here this morning.
Awesome. Well, we'll get started off with the discussion. Tell us a little bit about the background of the Renewable Bioproducts Institute, your purpose, your research areas, and any other pertinent information for people who don't know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that purpose, I'm going to bring up a couple of slides and talk to you a little bit about, use some visuals to describe the answer to that question, Matt. Essentially, I'm a professor at Georgia Tech, and my research area is in forest-based and other kinds of natural materials. But I also have the privilege of leading this other group on campus called the Renewable Bioproducts Institute. And we have about 75 people in RBI. There are staff, faculty, and students in that group. And really our mission is to develop a community of researchers at Georgia Tech who develop, thought leadership. We want to develop the new ideas in applied research for renewable products and developing new packaging, developing new fuels and chemicals from forest biomass, wood or plants. And we formerly were known as the Institute of Paper Science and Technology, or IPST, which was an organization founded originally in 1929 in Wisconsin and moved to Atlanta in 1989 and built this building here, the Paper Tricentennial Building. So this is where we live and work here in Midtown Atlanta. So one of the ways that we function is we have a lot of interaction with industry, and we have two major industry interactions. One is we have an industrial advisory board, and these are our members of RBIs. And so those are the 7 companies mentioned here. And this industrial advisory board essentially advises me and the faculty about how we manage RBI, how we invest out. We have an endowment which provides most of our funding. How do we decide what areas to work in our research? That's what the Industrial Advisory Board does. We also have a pulp and paper foundation, which is includes many of these companies plus some others. This is our education side. So we provide for educating students in the fundamentals of the pulp and paper industry. So engineering students at Georgia Tech can take a series of courses to earn a minor or a certificate in paper science and engineering. And so this group of companies provides funding and provides experiences like internships and things like that. And many of them have operations in Georgia. So then one last slide about RBI I'll point out here is we're not an academic department, so we're not mechanical engineering or chemical engineering. We operate in between academic departments. So our goal is to get different faculty and different students working together on these problems facing the forest products industry. And we do things like give faculty lab space in our building. We provide a lot of funding for graduate students who are doing really technical research on these topics. We have a $60 million endowment that came from the Institute of Paper Chemistry Foundation. And we use that to fund students doing their 4 or 5 years of deep study for a PhD student, for example. We've got an analytical services laboratory, a number of them for pulping chemistry, paper and wood physical properties, and do a lot of interaction with external industry, doing analysis for them. And I already mentioned our industry boards, but we've got education and outreach areas as well. We have this Robert C. Williams Papermaking Museum. It's really unique facility where we use that to educate the public and even a lot of students about both the art and the science of pulp and paper. So that's my overview of RBI.
Thank you, Dr. Meredith. I appreciate that background. Georgia Tech is a vital institution, and that's coming from a UGA grad. So big props there. But a vital institution, and you guys are doing important work that has impact on our industry, not only here in the state, but across the nation. So we appreciate that background. Part of the work of the Georgia Forestry Association and the foundation is centered around highlighting the innovative uses of wood, and particularly how forests, both standing trees and products that we're producing from trees, are solving kind of real world challenges and are framed as kind of a solution to issues that everybody cares about, from climate change to water to sustainable products. So tell us a little bit about how researchers within RBI are leveraging cellulose and other materials made from wood to solve kind of those real world challenges.
Well, as I said, one of the things we do is support students. So we have this endowment and we use it to support students working in a number of critical areas that we view as critical for the future of allowing forest products and cellulose and lignin in particular to be not only for making paper and making it more efficiently, but also for making a whole host of new products. So our goal is to really expand the breadth and volume of products that can be made with forest materials and expand the value so valorize and make higher value products. So we focus on three areas. One is in paper, packaging, and tissue. So this is the kind of the traditional area. But we're focused on innovative manufacturing techniques that lower the energy footprint of pulping and paper making. And we're focused on novel products, new products. So a lot of that is in the packaging space, actually. So making paper-based packaging more functional so that it could serve a wider range of packaging needs. And as we're gonna discuss later, even substitute for plastics in many cases. Then there's work in what we call bioindustrial technology, which looks at beyond making paper, what are the other things we could make with wood chemistry. And so this is looking at things like fuels and precursors that could be used to make plastics, actually, instead of making them out of petroleum, making them out of chemicals derived from wood. And even things like pharmaceuticals, like acetaminophen, Tylenol. Could we make that from wood chemicals? And then the last one is circular materials. And this is looking more at solid phase materials like plastics, but we could also include construction materials as well. Essentially eliminating waste, kind of moving away from our throwaway society towards a circular economy where products at their end of life are able to be recycled and reused. And we think that forest materials in particular are an important part of that reuse, enabling that kind of economy.
Now, I appreciate that context, and I think the members on this call appreciate the work that's being done there. Just to dig a little bit deeper on that, what are sort of the end of life problems of plastic packaging that
Sure.
cellulose or paper-based materials can address?
Right. Let me actually pull up a slide or two and talk about what some of the problems are. So this is a good one. If we look at many of the types of plastic packages that are proliferating both in our stores, but also in our landfills and in the environment, many of these are multi-layer flexible packages. And you can see the trends in your grocery store aisle that even many things that used to be rigid packages are moving towards flexible stand-up pouches. So the issue, these packages are really critical to our food supply. They allow food to last much longer, and that's good. But they're very difficult to recycle. They're almost impossible to recycle. And that's because of their multi-layer nature. So if you deconstruct one of these packages, you have a moisture barrier plastic on the outsides, and you typically have an oxygen barrier on the inside, which can be a plastic or it might even be aluminum. And then you have adhesive materials in between those. And there could be other things like a print layer below this where the package printing would go, which is usually polyester. But this multi-layer construction means that you've got 5 or 10 different materials in there, and they're very difficult to separate. And once they've been adhered together, they're difficult to separate. And so recyclers really don't have good ways to handle these. And that's why when you have these kind of packages, they're typically just thrown away. They can't go into the recycling stream. So unfortunately, for us, this stream of flexible packaging is today about 40% of all packaging types. You can see how that compares to metal and glass and liquid container boards. And this is just growing. And if there's in a year globally, human beings are producing about 3.5 trillion pieces of plastic packaging. And so flexible is 40% of that, about 1 trillion. So that's a tremendous number of tiny pieces of packaging floating around. And as I said, there really aren't any very good end-of-life options for it. So this is one other slide that talks about the end-of-life options, but if you look at one of these structures, this is a cross-section, you might have PET, polyester on the bottom, polyethylene on the top. These are water and print layers. In the middle, there's something called EVOH, which is a very common oxygen barrier plastic. And then you have adhesives. And this kind of structure is the one that we're looking at trying to replace. But the end-of-life options for this kind of plastic are, you can landfill it. If you do that, then basically I would say about 40% of plastics are landfilled, and another 32% end up leaking out into the environment. On their way to get to a landfill, inadvertently they leak out. They get into the waterways, or they get into other places in the environment. So about 72% of plastics like this are landfilled, or they just leak out to the oceans, unfortunately. And they remain there for hundreds of years. Another option is incineration, which is actually better than, in my opinion, letting it leak to the ocean, but that only accounts for, that's less than 10% today, but at least you can recover the energy from the inherent material. But then that releases carbon dioxide to the environment. Finally, there's recycling, but as I said, these kinds of plastics really can't be recycled. So there are people working on making them recyclable, but they're really not recyclable. So those are the end-of-life challenges. I think this is one of our greatest problems facing society today, is replacing these kinds of structures with things that could be recycled.
In our earlier discussions, this is maybe off our script a little bit, but in our earlier discussions, you had mentioned that there is a little bit of an arms race, if you will, between the forest industry, who is working to, kind of revolutionize these products through cellulose from forest biomass. And then there's the plastic industry that is also trying to innovate their product to make it recyclable.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about their what the plastic industry is doing, and kind of what our industry could be doing to talk more about, the properties of our product?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say that there's a tremendous amount of activity going on globally with plastics manufacturers, as well as the people who use packaging. So the retailers, food brand owners, personal care products. So your Procter and Gamble and your Unilevers and your Amazon and Walmart, they're all saying, you have to give us recyclable or degradable or compostable packages by somewhere between 2025 to 2030. So that's what most of the companies are saying today. And so the plastics manufacturers are responding to that. And so they've really kicked it into high gear in terms of taking structures like these and figuring out, well, how could we deconstruct this material at its end of life and separate out the layers and then individually recycle them. And or could we substitute in different materials here for, say, the oxygen barrier in a way that allows it to be separated at the end of life and allows the whole thing to be recycled. So that's what a lot of their emphasis is on. The others include developing alternative recycling, and it's called upcycling. So you might hear this terminology if you do some reading, instead of calling it recycling, calling it upcycling. The conventional recycling for plastics is basically mechanical thermal. You shred the plastic into pieces, you melt it down and make pellets, and then that gets sent back as recycled feedstock to people that make packages or other parts. And the problem there is when you melt and shred plastic, you end up doing some damage to the chemistry little by little. So you make the chains shorter and they lose their properties. So a typical, like a PET container with, like a PET water bottle can be recycled about 7 times before it just can't be recycled anymore. So there is a loss in value when you do this kind of conventional recycling, because the recycled product, it sells for a lower value, and you always have to blend in virgin feedstock to make up the properties. So what they're looking at is something called upcycling, which is using new kinds of techniques, which might be chemical or even biological, to take things like PET and break it down into valuable chemical intermediates, or maybe break it all the way back down to its original precursor, what they call the monomers. So that's where a lot of the emphasis is it's what I call upcycling. There's been a lot of investment from the Department of Energy on this and plastics manufacturers to develop alternative upcycling techniques, like processes, as well as alternatives to PET, polyethylene, especially, that could be taken back apart at the end of their life, restored fully to their original value in the value chain, and then reused.
I appreciate that, and I think something that could be valuable for our folks to hear is, is it a either or scenario, or is it both and, in terms of our product that we're researching and theirs that they're working on?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Matt. My belief is the arms race is not between paper and plastic or forest and petroleum, but it's between doing something versus doing nothing. And I think we should view it more as industries working together to create attractive solutions that might use both kinds of materials. And that's one of the areas that my own research group works in, is creating hybrid structures where you have combinations of petroleum-based plastic with wood-based materials that I think provide a much easier pathway to entry for some of these more sustainable products. So the idea is, instead of replacing every layer all at once, which is a big challenge, let's replace the one that makes the most sense. And in my opinion, that's the interior oxygen barrier. So it turns out that cellulose from wood contains a component called the cellulose nanocrystal, buried in the wood cell structure. And those are actually really great oxygen barriers. And so one of the things we're looking at is replacing the center layer with cellulose itself from wood. And when you do that, you get equivalent properties. And then you have a center layer that is essentially renewably sourced, and it becomes easier to separate these two other materials off. So that's one way I think that we can work together. Cellulose is highly recyclable, and the chemistry is it's quite distinct from polyethylene and polyester. So you can do things to, say, degrade or dissolve the cellulose and leave the other two polymers intact, and then create, in my opinion, a better recycling process where you have part wood-based, part plastic-based. So I think it will be working together personally.
Yeah, and I think you letting us know that you had reported your reporting today from the American Chemistry Association. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. American Institute of Chemical Engineers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and a convention that I'm not attending,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the best word to say, but how have some of the bigger brands, I guess, who use products like this, how do they interface with your research institute?
Mm-hmm.
Is it mainly through our kind of manufacturing members, or do you have people like Frito-Lay and other companies that are the forward-facing brands? Are they interested in kind of these real world problems?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I've been working on this area for about 12 years, actually. And it's only been in the last 2, maybe 3 years where I've seen this tremendous uptick in interest from the forward-facing brand owners, and not just lip service. Yeah, we believe in sustainability, but things like, can we come support research with you? We've got money, we want to give it to you to solve these problems. So you can think of just about any brand that you've got around your house, and I can almost guarantee you they're investing in plastic alternatives or making plastics more renewable. But many of them, they see the value in paper-based packaging, wood-based materials, and are very interested in making paper-based bottles and paper-based tubes that can hold cosmetics or shaving cream or fruit juice. So I mean, I'll just to name a few that I know of. Unilever makes many of the things in your medicine cabinet, in your bathroom. Procter and Gamble, Nestle. So many companies like this, L'Oreal and Estee Lauder, cosmetics companies, they're all looking at how do we make hybrid products, so where we can have a paper substrate, because paper is so highly recyclable, and it's 80% of it's recovered. It's the most highly recovered solid waste, right, in terms of recycling. So they see that, but they want to make a paper bottle or a paper tube. that can actually hold a liquid and have it be recyclable is a challenge. But they're working on that. Yeah.
And a good segue to that line of thinking, we had a question from Sean Derome, who is with Rayonier Timberlands on the Timberland side. Sean asked, which materials cannot be reasonably replaced by engineered wood fiber without compromising the product's integrity? So, a good example of that, as Sean mentioned, is paper straws. I think everybody thinks that paper straws are nice. We're saving the turtles, so to speak, or at least heading in that direction. But from a consumer standpoint, a paper straw is, pretty much next to like putting your face on the ground. So, like, what, in your opinion, are the products that can kind of reasonably be, transformed?
Right. So I think the issue, the straw issue is a somewhat it's a low tech product in that it doesn't have really, it just has to be an open cylinder that you can suck things through, right? But it illustrates the problems with wood fiber based materials when they come into contact with water. And I would say that that's probably the most challenging issue. So is making these types of products be good barriers to the products that are contained within them when you think about packaging. So if there's a liquid, whether it be water or oil based, there's going to either be some kind of liner coating or some kind of chemistry done to the wood fiber itself to make it a better barrier. So any industry where you can apply such a liner or modify the wood fiber chemistry in a way that is still acceptable to consumers or to say the regulatory agencies, the FDA. You can't just do any chemistry to something that's food product, right? I mean, we could make great barriers with dangerous chemicals that wouldn't be approved for food use. So, but I still think there is a lot of open area here in products that are things like the paper bottle space and the paper tube spaces, and the just flexible film wrapping substitutes that have a paper substrate or wood fiber basis. And
used an example, I think, in our discussion of the kind of craft singles cheese example. And is that something that is relevant within that plastic film?
I think so. Yeah, I believe so. So I had skipped over this slide, but it's probably a good segue to talk a little bit about some of the projects we're supporting in RBI that are in this packaging space. So many of the project on the bottom here is the one that my group is involved in, but 4 other professors work with me. And this is one of our films that it's coated on either polylactic acid or cellulose acetate as a base layer, but it has cellulose nanocrystals and it has chitin fibers in it as well. It's, as you can see, it's transparent, it's very flexible, and it's a really excellent oxygen barrier. So it can function. This would be a perfect drop-in replacement almost for a cheese wrapping, actually, because of its oxygen and water barrier properties. And it's it's either, depending on what substrate you use, if it's the cellulose acetate substrate, then it's 100% carbohydrate material. So there are spaces where you can operate even without achieving great water barrier properties. And this is one of them. And if you find my little slide on water barrier properties, here we are. This is a good one. So this is a little bit technical, but if you just want to look at, on this vertical axis, this is the oxygen transmission rate through the package, and the horizontal axis is water vapor transmission rate. So basically, how good is the package at blocking water and oxygen? And so in the upper right corner, it's not very good at all. Water and oxygen go straight through it. In the lower left corner, they're really awesome. They keep it dry and free of oxygen. And you can see some of the products like fruits, vegetables, salads, bakery products, and cheese. Really, they don't have incredibly stringent water vapor barrier properties. They have what I would call moderate oxygen barrier properties. Some of the materials here in the open circles are ones that people here at RBI are working on. And so we've basically already solved that problem in many ways, that we can get oxygen and water barrier that would be great for cheese, bakery products. And we're getting very close to meat products. So hopefully that answers some of your question about there are product categories already where I think wood fiber products could work. And we're getting very close to us. A big one would be the meat or fresh meat categories. Yeah.
That's huge. And I think one of the most important takeaways is how integral we have to be as an industry with meeting the needs of not only the consumers, but first kind of food scientists who are looking at maintaining quality and food safety within that that packaged environment. Just to switch gears a little bit,
sure.
We did want to ask you about other products outside of packaging. We talked about some of the more innovative uses for wood fiber that are being researched both at RBI and elsewhere. Could you tell us a little bit about those products?
Right, sure. I can give you a couple of examples, and one of them is making pharmaceuticals from lignin. So as you know, lignin is one of the components in the wood cell structure. And one of the things we're looking at are how do we increase the value of lignin, and how do we recover it more energy efficiently? And one of the very recent publications of a group of faculty and students from RBI was published last month. They've shown basically how to fractionate lignin and produce precursor chemicals that are used to make medicines. So these are useful chemicals in making active pharmaceutical ingredients. So acetaminophen and many other categories of medicines. So that's one example of making a higher value material that would have a higher market price from lignin. Directly from trees. So another area that we work a lot in is energy saving and low carbon footprint processes for pulp mills, as well as for paper mills. But in the pulp mills, we've done a lot of work on membranes for black liquor recovery. Basically, without getting in too much detail, the black liquor that comes out of your digester is traditionally recovered in a multi-effect evaporator, meaning the water is boiled off. And then the concentrated black liquor is burned as a biofuel in the recovery boiler. And this is really an important part of closing the loop on energy and carbon in a pulp mill. But these multi-effect evaporators can use a lot of the energy itself. So what several researchers have been working on at Tech is developing graphene oxide as a membrane that it's tough enough as a membrane to handle black liquor, which is just a terrible feedstock. If you think about it, it's very corrosive, it's high pH, it contains lots of fouling compounds, and these graphene oxide membranes are really, really tough. They're recalcitrant. They can manage this really aggressive feed. And what they're using it for is recovering water out of it and concentrating the black liquor so that you don't depend so much on the evaporators. And right now, the target that they can meet is you utilize a small membrane unit to recover or reduce about 40% of the energy used in the evaporator. And this one has been a membrane trial unit has been installed and even gone to trial at a mill here in Georgia. So that's one of the ones that we're excited about as well. So there are things beyond packaging that we're working on. Yeah.
We're getting close to time, and I want to be sure that folks on the call have the opportunity to ask questions.
Okay.
And we've got a couple of paper manufacturers on the call as well, so I know the conversation around that black liquor process would be interesting to them as well. So if you guys have questions, feel free to come off mute and ask those questions directly to Dr. Meredith, or insert those into the chat. While we're kind of thinking about that, the one kind of concluding question that I had is, what do you see as the greatest challenge in making some of these products go to market, or what are some of the greatest challenges in kind of commercializing the research that you guys are doing right now?
So I think there are a couple of great challenges, but besides there are some properties that we still need to get a handle on to make it really match conventional plastics and mechanical adhesion and water barrier. But those are really solvable challenges as long as we have the R&D support to do it. So R&D is not cheap to do, and maintaining a robust funding base to keep these projects moving and accelerating them is probably the biggest challenge. I would say another challenge to commercialization is making the material format acceptable for conversion operations. So whether it's a paper coating or a plastic coating, making sure that the material, the way it's delivered, that it's coatable or applicable in a way that can be done on a roll-to-roll format at high speeds. That's the other, I think, major challenge. And that one is one that really requires partnerships with manufacturers, so that, in the university, we're typically really good at early stage novel ideas, but have less experience with scaling up to the manufacturing level. And so that's where having partnerships with manufacturers is very important for us. So
outside of that, is there anything else that you need from the forest industry or landowners, foresters, or anybody on our team here at GFA?
Right. Well, that's also a great question. I would say, I think it's important when you're speaking to anyone who has influence on, say, federal funding, at the Department of Agriculture or Department of Energy, that you communicate excitement and interest in the development of novel forest products that can solve these energy and climate challenges of conventional plastics. And I think letting, if you know, state legislators or even U.S. Legislators, letting them know that we here in Georgia are just very interested and we're excited. We believe that it's just around the corner that we could have whole new categories of wood fiber based material products that will, create jobs as well as help solve climate problems. I think that's really important.
Well, we're here definitely to support you in that way, and I look forward to continuing that relationship. One additional question from the chat, Sean asked specifically, could you speak to competition with other fibers such as hemp? What are the pros and cons of each from a chemical sustainability standpoint? And the one thing that I'll add here is there's in addition to hemp, I think oftentimes we're kind of beaten up, whether it's in advertising or other mediums, about sustainability from products that are made from like bamboo or mushroom fibers or things along those lines. And I think the immediate reaction from people who are in the industry is that, wow, I mean, we've really worked for the last 100 years on the sustainability of our product, and how chemically intensive are the processes that are being used on some of these other plant-based fibers. So
right.
What sort of knowledge can you give us from that standpoint on those competing products?
Right. Well, I think that the hemp area is not one I've worked in personally, but I mean, certainly there's a lot of activity around it, and I think it's viewed as a crop that could be grown in the South, and I think that there are some things about the processing of hemp that are perhaps a little bit easier, and some things that are quite different than pulping wood fiber, pulping wood. And I mean, one is just you have a much lower content of, in my opinion, of things like recalcitrant lignin compounds, and you also have bio oils and hemp that can be recovered in a fairly straightforward way and used as biofuels, biodiesel and things like that. So I think that plus the rapid growth cycle maybe attracts people, and the fiber strength, things like that. It's one of those areas where I wouldn't necessarily view it as a all or nothing. Volume wise, I don't think it could replace the wood fiber for pulp for paper products. But I think, and you also you're not going to derive timber from it as well, right? For high strength construction activities. But I would view it as possibly an opportunity to have an alternative fiber source, if it could be lower cost, that could improve recycled fiber, recycled paper products, like as a minor, as an additive that could improve the strength, for example, of recycled pulp products.
And then one final question that we've gotten in the chat from Mr. David Jordan, who's a forest landowner, actually. He said the development of novel forest products hopefully would increase demand in what landowners receive for their timber. And from that standpoint, do you see the development of these products increasing demand and increasing the value of forest products?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's really one of our number one goals, and something that we think about when we're selecting what project to work on. We're trying to select things that have high value in the marketplace, so that we're adding value to the end of the value chain on the derived products. And I think that will work its way back all the way to the landowners eventually. But if we could find a way to replace just 10% of plastic packaging, you're talking about millions of tons of cellulose annually, in addition to what's used today, and in products that many of these packages that we're talking about, the multi-layers, they're $4 to $6 per pound. So they're not, even the conventional plastics, they're not cheap. They're not 50 cents a pound. They're $5 a pound on order. And so our vision is to put cellulose into products like that are used in large volumes and have pretty large, pretty high values in the marketplace. So.
Well, that's good news for us, and I think it's something to be excited about for sure. Thank you, Dr. Meredith, for your time. Okay. Thank you for the work that you and your team are doing to advance forest products and the usability of our products into the future. Sure. Your institute is one of the reasons that makes Georgia the #1 forestry state in the nation, and we appreciate all that you do.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. At this time, I'm actually going to go over a couple of things just from an association standpoint. And I look forward to any questions that folks have, but I'm going to share my screen here. Actually get this in slideshow mode. In addition to these town hall events, your association is working for you every day. For those of you who don't know, our vision or how we divide our work is divided into these kind of core areas: advocacy, membership. So making sure that we're delivering value to those of you who have invested in us. Management. So looking at kind of our back office and making sure that we're good stewards of your membership dollars. Communications, which is what my team handles. Our foundation, the Georgia Forestry Foundation. And of course, advocacy, which is kind of at the center of our strategy as we move forward. This is a quick snapshot of our team. I'm not going to go into kind of great detail about what each of these folks do, but this is a representation of the people who are on the ground doing work that is hopefully adding value to your assets every day. One thing that I do want to highlight is one on the call with me today is our membership director, Tim Miller. And Tim, if you're there, you just give everybody a wave. Tim is really your eyes and ears. And so if you have issues that you need to talk to us about from a foundation perspective, from the advocacy perspective, or others elsewhere, Tim is on board to do that. In addition, if you have people in your communities or in your networks who are interested in membership with the association, a quick way to solve that is just to put them in touch with Tim and let him talk with them about the best ways to get involved. In addition to that, we just hired a new director of government affairs. After about 5 years, our former vice president of government affairs, Tom Beyer, took another job with a consulting firm in Atlanta. And it was a bittersweet moment for us, but we went ahead and offered, and he has accepted the director of government affairs position from Craig Anderson. He spent the last 7 years as legislative director for Congressman Austin Scott. And so he knows our issues well, and we look forward to inviting him to our team. We just wanted to touch briefly on the census data and really why this data kind of highlights the importance of our work. As you guys may have seen in the AJC and elsewhere, Georgia is one of the top 5 fastest growing states. Our metro Atlanta communities, specifically Fulton, Cobb, DeKalb, Gwinnett, grew each by 10%, but definitely worth highlighting counties like Bryan County near Savannah grew up to 48%, and then Forsyth County, which is kind of North Atlanta, not where our office is located, for those of you who've been there, grew by 43%. So, and those are some of the fastest growing counties in the nation. 67 of Georgia's 159 counties, mostly smaller rural counties, actually lost population. And so, what does that mean from a representation standpoint? The places in gray and light gray are where we do business every day, but we also do business in urban communities. And so the importance of our work, both from an advocacy perspective at the state and local level, making sure that our elected officials know about the work that we do and know that there are people in their districts who care about forestry and whose livelihoods depend on forestry, is critically important. In addition to that, just from an education standpoint, when we think about the role of the foundation, we are providing critical value by connecting our industry to those Georgians who may be new to our state and may be definitely future voters. So just wanted to highlight kind of the results of that census and kind of how we're thinking about it. From an advocacy perspective, our CEO, Andres Villegas, is actually on he can't be here today. He's on a tour with congressional staffers from Georgia, about 20 of them. And he's doing that with the Georgia Forestry Commission and the University of Georgia, taking them around to landowners, active logging sites, manufacturing facilities, and elsewhere, so that they really understand, who the forest industry in Georgia is, and more about specifically our issues. I wanted to touch briefly on kind of the priorities for our next legislative session. We are looking at severance tax on timber. In Georgia, we are unique in that we must pay 100% of the fair market value of the timber that's severed at the time of harvest. We'd like to reduce that to 40%, which would be the same as other real property. And I know Mr. David Jordan's on the phone right now and could help me from a CPA standpoint if we have any specific questions on that. But the responsibility in those instances on severance tax falls to the landowner. And so we see this as an opportunity to increase profitability for landowners and the entire forestry supply chain. The second issue on hunting without permission is a continuation of discussions on House Bill 343 that we introduced last year, but did not pass all the way through the legislative process. It is focused on kind of closing that key loophole and looks to increase penalties on repeat offenders. So people who are, out there hunting, obviously on your property, decked out in full camo, maybe have a gun with them or a bow, and tell you that they're out there looking for arrowheads, trying to basically get at that situation. The fourth issue is around ad valorem tax on logging equipment. It's interesting that loggers are the only ones in the agriculture industry who are required to pay ad valorem tax on equipment. And so that is something that we're trying to address. Both the severance tax issue and the ad valorem tax on logging equipment will require 2/3 approval in both the state and the House, and it will be required to be voted on as a statewide referendum during the general election. So that'll be a heavy lift for us, but we're definitely positioned to move forward. And I don't know, Mr. Richard Royal is on the call with us today, and he is our resident tax expert and can be here to answer any specific questions if we get those today. Hey, Mr. Richard.
Good morning.
Hey there. Hopefully I talked about those two issues well, but anything additional that you would like to add from those perspectives?
No, I think you pretty well covered it. Like you said, it will take a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate and a statewide referendum to be successful. But we feel like this brings parity for the forestry industry in taxation matters.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all that you do for us, Mr. Richard. We appreciate your support and definitely on these tax matters as you are the resident expert. Finally, we did testify yesterday to the Rural Development Council on this final issue, which is important to all manufacturers and operations, which is looking at kind of addressing our collective issues when it comes to transportation. So the harvest and haul sector. We really see this as a three-prong issue of labor or availability of drivers, weights of definitely looking at truck weights, and then insurance. And so we did provide testimony to the Rural Development Council yesterday, and we are working with the governor's office on exploring an executive order that would more permanently get us to that 90,000 or 95,000 pound gross vehicle weight. I'll pause here on the advocacy side and see if anybody has any specific questions. Okay, Hearing none, we'll move on to the, how you can stay engaged with us. So on the membership side, I know Tim and I would both appreciate if you tell your friends about GFA, and if you need specific, materials to either hand out to them in person or present in a presentation format, just let us know. We've got those things handy and we can make it happen. We've got a couple of upcoming events as well. Our emerging leaders will be meeting on November 18th. So if you have an emerging leader who is in your company or part of your family, please do send information to them about this. It's on our website, or you can get in touch with me and I'll send some information over about that. In addition, we've got our Georgia Landowner Summit on December 17th. So that'll be an important event for landowners looking at specifically how do we increase the profitability of our timberland. And so we've got an initial agenda for that done, and we're working on publishing the website for that event this week. There will be opportunities to attend virtually or in person at Jekyll Island if you so choose. On the advocacy front, please join the fort. This is our way, our forest resource teams are a way that we specifically reach out to legislators and inform them and engage them in issues that are important to us during the legislative session and afterwards. Also, if you have capacity, please join one of GFA's committees. We have committees related to tax, harvesting and logistics, and our environmental committee that looks at environmental regulations. So if you're interested in joining one of those, please let us know. On the foundation side, just stay engaged on the work that we do, and let us know if there are opportunities for us to help you in your community outreach efforts. In addition, we're launching our Forest Champions campaign this year, which is really our funding campaign for the 2022 cycle. So if you are interested in becoming a forest champion, please let me know. And there's a lot of people on this call who are already champions, so we appreciate you for doing that. And then finally, from a communications perspective, just look out for our emails. Join us on social, attend events like this, and always ask us questions, because if we do not hear from you, we may not know the things that are important to you and the issues that are adding value to your businesses. So I'll pause there briefly for any questions, but happy to take those at this time.